Okay, welcome today to Mvskoke Media's Live Wire. Today we're going to be talking with the manager of the Muskogee Creek Nation Election Board, Nelson Harjo Jr., about how the pandemic has affected this year's election, if there's going to be any changes to the process. Also, the Carter Center released its report on the 2019 election. We're going to talk about that a little bit and maybe if there's going to be changes associated with that report. But first off, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Harjo, for joining us today. I know we were running a little on Indian time, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And
Yeah, and I apologize for that. I was
it's no problem, sir.
actually got caught up with a couple other things. Like I need to stop. I need to get on this interview.
Yeah. So first off, I guess the question that I had would be, um, has the what's the game plan this year as far as the pandemic and the process of citizens voting? Are there going to be more opportunities to do absentee voting, or has there been any changes, I guess, from the last election?
There hasn't been a significant change in the overall election setup. What we were hoping, what was going to happen, it looks like it is happening now, is that with more and more of our citizens and just the general population getting vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccines, that it looks like we're going to be able to proceed as normal to a certain degree. Um, but we are going to implement like safe space and PPE at each in-person voting location. So we'll still have the 2 days of early voting on the Wednesday and Thursday prior to this year's elections, which I believe that will be September 15th and 16th. It will still be at the four locations of Okmulgee, Eufaula, Okemah, and Tulsa community centers. And of course, we will have the 18 voting locations on election day. Absentee voting is still available. I believe we mailed out absentee ballot request forms to all 17,900 something odd voters that we have back in February, in the hopes that we can get, if people were planning on voting by mail, that they could send those in, and we could get all this processed well ahead of time if there was going to be a big influx of those mail-in requests. So we did that a lot sooner than what we have in past elections, and we're hoping that if people feel that that might be the safest way for them to cast a ballot, then they have every opportunity to do so through the mail.
I see. And so, there's a lot of hope that we'll, over the summer, like you were saying, due to the vaccinations, that we won't have to be as rigid with the social distancing and everything maybe in the fall. But has there been any discussion within the election board about what if we have to go back to a really strict lockdown? If we have like a fall surge, like what have those discussions been like?
Yes, we had talked with a few of the council reps as far back as November, December in 2020 to say, hey, if this thing is not going, if this pandemic is going to be ongoing, and God forbid if it gets worse, we might have to go to an all mail-in vote in order for everybody to be able to vote safely and everybody have the opportunity to vote. And along with that, we were going to discuss, okay, now if this is something that we have to do, well, then we're also not only going to talk about just, making that a mandatory thing of people having to mail their ballots in, but we're also going to have to look at maybe increasing maybe the mail out times, and maybe even looking at, pushing back the times that we can allow these things to come in to be accepted. Because if that's the way that everybody's going to have to vote, well, then, who knows how many mail-in ballots we might have gotten, if that was going to be the case. And if, like I said, God forbid if things do start to trend back in that direction. I know those discussions has already been had, because at the end of the day, the thing that we want to happen is everybody to still have the right to cast, their vote for our elected leaders. So whatever it is that we have to do in order to make that a reality, that's what we're prepared to do.
That sounds good. I want to also mention to everybody that's watching the stream right now, if you have a specific question for the election board or Nelson, just pop it into the chat and we'll ask it directly to them. Let's talk a little bit about, has there been any process changes outside of the pandemic? Is there going to be anything new that we're going to see this election as far as ways to vote or anything other than what we've already talked about?
I can't think of anything without thinking of like specific details and things like that at the moment that we really have. I just know that some of the other questions that you might have might, bring some of those things out as as we get further into the Carter report.
If you want to move on into the report, just for the audience, the Carter Center, who internationally they monitor elections all over the world, and they make recommendations for securing the process more and giving more people access to the vote and making it more transparent and etc. They came in and observed the 2019 election at the Mvskoke Creek Nation, and over I guess it's been now it's 2 years, they've compiled their final report. And the link to that report is in the description of this video if you want to go check it out yourself. And it has a section that has recommendations for the legislative branch as far as laws and things that they recommend could be changed. And then it also has a section for the election authorities, what changes they could see and recommendations they want to make. And I wanted to talk with Mr. Harjo about this and just say, have you had a chance to look at the report? What did you think of the process also working with the Carter Center? What was your personal impression of that?
To be honest with you, they were a lot more laid back than what I had anticipated. I, was kind of under the impression of just hearing, a lot of the places, locations that they had been to, that this team that came in was going to be, pretty hardcore, so to speak, straightforward. But they were very professional, very friendly, very inquisitive, because they didn't want to come in thinking that, or given the impression that they were the experts, in our own with our own election laws. So that they're a very good group and easy and very easy to work with. That was my impression.
Have you had an opportunity to look at any of the recommendations in the report? I know, I just sent it to you earlier, but I wonder, what do you think of the recommendations? And there's some stuff that I have highlighted, but what was your impression of the recommendations?
Yes, matter of fact, the group leader, Miss Brett Lacey, she emailed me the report before they published it to on their website, and she said, we'll be posting this, here in a day or so. So just to let you know, but here it is, because we've been asking for it ourselves. The board has, okay, what do they have to say? So I've got to read through quite a bit of it when I first received it. I've looked at it a couple times, since then, especially whenever the board talks about it in its meetings. But my overall impression of the report is it's pretty fair, and it is an objective report because the Carter Center receives no funding from the entity that it is observing. So they have their own fundraisers and federal funding sources that funds that operation and allows them to go out and do what they do. So it is a very objective third-party view of how the elections are taking place.
So from your standpoint, some of the recommendations were made one of the first ones on, or the first one on the list is to strengthen the election manager's office in administrative and operational terms to increase the local ownership of the process. And then it says, while vendors may be necessary for some components of the process, providing additional resources to the office of the election manager will help ensure consistent Mvskoke Creek ownership of all aspects of the electoral process. What do you take away from that? And has the board, is there going to be a push for more power put into the election manager's office or more funding to make these recommendations happen? Have you heard anything along those lines?
Yes, matter of fact, we've already made quite a few of those items in that one recommendation a reality. We were able to garner a small portion of the COVID-19 funds, the relief funding that the tribe was granted last year during the I guess the major part of the pandemic. And we went out and we purchased our own election setup. So what this does is, whenever the Carter Center recommends taking a more, an authoritative approach to its own elections, we have done that by getting our own setup in lieu of relying on a single source vendor to come in and to provide the equipment, provide the systems to run that equipment, things of that nature. So we have our own equipment and our own setup in order to take charge of our own elections from the very beginning process all the way to the end of election night. So we've taken a big, major step in that regards.
So for this election, are you guys going to be utilizing that stuff, that in-house stuff in this election, or is it going to be for the next cycle?
It will be for this election.
So how much external process, I guess, or companies are you guys going to use? Is it going to get drastically reduced, or is it going to stay, are you guys going to run like them as a fail-safe and then run internally? Like how's that going to be broken up, if you can talk about it?
Yeah, most definitely. So we, of course, and just so that way everybody can understand, this process is that, we didn't go and develop our own machines. We didn't go and we didn't, build our own machines, but there are several election vendors out there that supply several different states and counties with ballot tabulating devices. And that's how, these devices, scan the ballots, and that's how you get your results for each election. So we went with Civic, who is based out of San Antonio, Texas. Matter of fact, Hart supplies the entire state of Oklahoma with voting machines. And what we have is we have the latest version of those tabulating devices. So it's a very reputable company. Matter of fact, I believe they also do business with the Cherokee Nation, with the Osage Nation as well. I believe they were doing business with a few other smaller tribal nations here in the state of Oklahoma. But so they're very familiar with working not only with elections the size of the state of Oklahoma, but they're also used to working with elections that are more the size of the voter participation in Cherokee Nation, the voter participation in Osage Nation, which we would fit right in there, amongst those two. So we went with them to get the tabulation devices, the software and the system to support those things. But we're also using a local vendor here out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that is going to be developing the ballots for the absentee packets when we get ready to mail those out. So we're still using outside sources in that regards to develop certain things for us. But as far as ownership and what the Carter Center is more focused on in this particular recommendation is that we have the ability to to start the process ourselves instead of giving all our information over to somebody else and saying, okay, you guys get everything ready for us and we'll see you on election day. So now the election board can oversee the setup process, can oversee the election day processes, and can oversee the the reporting side at the end of election night, and then any other reports that we might generate from the election.
So my next question on that front too, it would be, one of the things that's recommended from the report for everybody, the citizens and the election workers and the observers, is more training and more ability to train. And so with the process you guys are doing now, like what's happening on that front? Is there like a big training push happening now, or is it going to happen in a few months? Where are we at on that front?
Yeah, matter of fact, I'll be honest, we haven't got down a particular date as of yet, because we started advertising for the precinct committee positions this past month. So first things first, you got to have people, or we need to know we have enough people to actually move forward, with training, specifically, the workers themselves. But the training sessions that we are going to offer themselves are open to the public. We've tried to make that known in years past and elections past. I'll try to make that more of a point moving forward, that anybody that wants to attend these training sessions, they are open to the public. So that way, our citizens and voters can get more familiar with how the process itself takes place. We haven't really, like I said, nailed down the training dates just yet, but that in and of itself is a big major change, because in years past and elections past, we've only offered a one training session very close to the election, so that way, in hopes that the election workers will retain a lot of those the training, the different procedures that we shared with them. But this time around, we're going to try to offer multiple training sessions, so that way we know our workers and anybody else that attends the trainings is really educated on the process as much as we can possibly get them educated.
Well, a thought occurs to me just right now while we're doing this. The training sessions, if they're open to the public, is it all of the information in there public information, I would assume, how the process works, or is there stuff that needs to be kept only for people who are going to actually do the work?
No, because really everything that we do, everything that in the way that we train our workers, and everything that we educate them on, is the vast majority, if not all of it, I would assume, I'll have to say all of it, comes from Title 19. So what we train our workers, in the way that voters are supposed to present themselves. This is what you do after a voter presents themselves. All of those things are taken directly out of Title 19. What this does, the training session, just kind of shows you how it happens in like a real scenario, instead of just trying to figure it out, as it's written on paper.
I see. Well, the idea that occurred to me is, and we could probably talk about this when we're not live streaming, but something that might be cool is we could do a training session through, on Mvskoke Media, just like how we're doing this, if it's something that is public knowledge and everything, and then also any citizen could go and see what we're doing here, so they would have, we could try to build that understanding of the process. It just occurred to me because you were talking about the public meetings and how we need to get the word out for people if they want to be precinct managers or even poll workers or observers. And we would love here to facilitate anything we can do with that process. Moving on, one of the things that's on the recommendations for the election authorities is to increase voter and civic education, kind of like what we were talking about there. How big a part of that, or had there been discussions on the election board on that topic? And what's your take on that as the election manager, or the manager of the election board? Is this, how big of a problem do you think that it is, the understanding of the process?
Well, I actually do believe that there needs to be more of an effort made to provide education when it comes to our voter registration process, our election processes, because there are, and I'm targeting our young people by saying this because I've talked with, just in passing, several of our younger citizens that, have no idea, about where they would even go to register to vote, or, where their nearest polling location is. So what we've done is, and trust me, COVID-19 really put a big damper on a lot of our plans over this past year. Is we were wanting to have more of a consistent presence in our different community centers and areas by establishing more voter outreach and voter registration drives in each of our community areas. And we were also looking forward to making, the trips to our citizens out of state. But unfortunately, COVID-19 put a big damper on a lot of those plans as far as the voter registration drives themselves, and actually getting to get out there and to meet with our citizens in almost like a one-on-one setting,
Yeah.
which I think is very important. Because what I might paste out there on social media, even though it's out there, not everybody might understand it the same way, or maybe we're not explaining things in a certain light to some people, and
Right.
we might have to explain it in a totally different way. So, and not using that as an excuse for in the future, but I just know for this past year there was a lot of plans that I had talked with the board about that really just got kind of dampened because of this COVID-19. But moving on into the future, we have started to talk with and started some cooperation with the Citizenship Office on getting a focus on our younger citizens. Not trying to be morbid here by any means, but just the aging population of our existing voter population. And we're starting to see where not only COVID-19, but other things that are starting to take away our citizens, and a lot of our citizens passing away and moving on. We're going to have to make sure we do what we can on our part to get our younger citizens more involved in our voting process, in our registration process. So it's not a really one-size-catch-all approach, because if it was, we would already been doing that, and we would already be seeing success with those things. It's more going to take a holistic approach, not only from us, but also from the nation itself. And we've also found out that it's really a grassroots efforts too, from leaders in their communities, because it's one thing for me to come down and preach to a person in Hannah, Oklahoma, the importance of voting, but it strikes a person different if it's one of their peers from that area as well. Because I can bring this and tell people the importance of voting out in Arizona and California, but if it's one of their fellow Californians or Arizonans that say, you know what, we really need to make more of an effort to be involved in this process, then we could step in and say, yes, we're glad to hear that. Let's get to work and see what we can help you guys with, and what questions we might be able to answer.
Well, we're getting close to time for my Zoom meeting to run out, so but I'm going to keep going. I want to keep going as long as we can. Do you have any concrete stuff that you guys have done, though, like as far as the outreach part, and you were talking specifically about the youth, like is there any concrete plans there, like what, or is this still in the planning stage?
Really, to be honest, this is still in the planning stage. What makes life kind of difficult on us is because every other year I'm looking at an election. At least myself, I'm looking at an election, and a lot of it too has to come down with what we're able to budget in order to do, projects, outside of taking care of the election itself, because I'm having to budget for an election every single year. Because that's just the way that the elections fall in. They fall in a different budget year every single year. So I'm always keeping my eye on, okay, with the resources that I do have, what can I do in order to devote so much to voter outreach, to voter education, or what am I going to have to use for the election itself? So those things we're still getting worked out on, but now that we've taken the big step of actually taking more of ownership of our own elections here, that just opens up the door for us to start focusing on all of the other items that we know that we have been needing to focus on for quite some time. And one of those is voter education and more of a presence out there with our citizens.
Well, I want to thank you, just in case we get booted off, I just wanted to thank you for coming in today and doing this live stream with me. It's been a pleasure. And one of the things I'd like to do running up to the election is do more stuff with you and the election board about the voter education process, just like what we're talking about. Because that's one of the things I'd like to see too, is more civic engagement throughout the tribe, all age groups really, but and focusing on the youth for sure. And the Carter Center report has a lot of good recommendations. Some of them, and if you got, again, if you're tuning in late, you can see the whole Carter Center report. The link to it is in the description of this video, and also a link to the election board's website. If you have any questions about this year's election, deadlines, how to file, etc., those things are all on the election board's website. So I just want to thank you, Nelson, for coming in, and I'm going to check and see if there is any more questions in here. There's a raucous discussion happening, but there's not, I don't see a lot of questions. Just want to tell the audience, we're going to keep going for a little bit longer. If you have specific questions for the election board, pop them into the chat and we'll ask Nelson and he'll answer as best he can. Personally, for you this year, one other thing, last election, we had that one night where the results took a long time to get in. Do you think that's going to happen again? Are we going to see that long stretch again, or what's your prediction?
Hopefully I don't get cut off here, because I'd really like to get this answer in here. So one of the things that we've been seeing over the past few elections is that there has been an increase, and a steady increase of absentee voters. So one of the things that the election board is mandated to do is that they make sure that the signatures match on the person requesting a ballot and the actual ballot that is mailed back to the election office. So that review has to take place before those ballots can be organized and actually counted. So what has happened over the past few elections, as there has been that gradual increase, well, it's taken longer and longer to review those signatures, thereby pushing back the time that the election board can actually get to counting the absentee ballots, which, always makes that, the time factor is always against us,
Yeah.
So what we have done this year, what the election board has done this year, has introduced legislation to the National Council, which they will be voting on this Saturday, in order to allow the election board to review the signatures on the absentee ballot that are mailed back to us at least 3 days prior to the election.
Oh,
so that way we can get the review, the signature review process out of the way, and then on election day, it will be just simply a matter of gathering up all of the reviewed ballots and getting those ready to be counted. So hopefully we can get the, what that will do, I say hopefully, what that will do is that will allow us to get the absentee ballot count ready. And so that way by 7 o'clock, we can get that posted. And shortly after all of the other precincts start to close at 7 and start to report back their results, we can get all this done in a very timely manner.
So, well, speaking of that legislation, then, how confident are you that the legislation is going to pass? Have you heard anything from the council, or what's your feelings about it?
Well, believe it or not, what the election board does anytime that it's going to introduce legislation or make recommendations to the council on what they might see needs to be changed with the law itself in order to help progress the election process. Is they will have a discussion with the council first on what their thoughts and opinions are if they were to introduce, said piece of legislation. Once a general consensus has been made that this is something that the council could support, then they will submit that piece of legislation to the council in order for them to take that up in a formal setting in order to pass it, and to put it up for a vote at the regular session.
I see.
So we followed that same procedure with this piece of legislation. The initial meetings that we had with the Hugh Committee, they seemed to like this and they thought it made sense. So taking the opinion of the Hugh Committee members, we introduced this formally to them this month, and it passed with the due pass by all the committee members, and they had no questions or concerns. I've listened in on the planning session just to see if there was anybody that had a question or concern about this particular piece of legislation. None of the council members seem to have any questions or concerns about it. And usually when it gets to that point, you have that feeling that more than likely it has a good chance of passing during a regular session at the end of the month. So I'm looking forward to this legislation passing. That's what I believe will happen.
Okay.
But we'll have to wait till this Saturday to see if that will become reality or not.
Well, we'll let you know. So I've pretty much covered everything I needed to cover, and I don't see any questions for you in the chat. This year's election, hopefully, will go smoother than the previous election. And I want to thank you again for coming on. And I think, is there anything you'd like to add? Is there anything you'd like to tell the citizens at this stage of the game for this year's election?
Yeah, we're still looking for precinct workers. All of that information is on our website. So, don't be shy. Just, and if you have questions, call us. That's probably what I tell everybody. If they have a question about anything, just call us. Because if there's a problem or if there's a concern that our citizens or voters may have, we don't know how to address it or if there is a problem unless they call us and tell us or ask us. So if they have any other questions, they can go to our website, and find a lot of information on there. And as always, the elections for this year, September 18th is the primary election day. September 15th and 16th will be early voting for the primary. And the general will happen November 6th, I believe. It's that first Saturday in November. And we'll have early voting that Wednesday and Thursday before the general as well.
Well, thanks so much, Nelson. Again, all the information about the election this year, you can click that link in the description of this video to go to the election board's website. And I look forward to chatting with you again about the election a little bit further down the year, or if you guys want to do any of those online trainings or anything, we could host stuff and get all the word out and all of the training and talk about the process more in depth. But Mado, for coming in today, sir.
All right, yeah, in God.